As Karen said, we're going to be talking about QPR, which is for suicide prevention. Kind of starting off this morning with not an easy topic, but one in which definitely our coalition really believes that everyone should be kind of aware of and definitely be talking about. So it's something that we feel that it's a training that we offer QPR. It's a free training. We feel that everybody should be open and willing to talk about suicide prevention. It's something that we can offer free to businesses in Portage County or to clubs, establishments, whatever it may be. I always tell people when I go out and do any type of suicide prevention training that this might be something that you may need in a work setting, or it might be something that you might need in your personal setting. You know, it might be something that you might need, maybe when you're out and about, or it might be something that you might need at work, but it's always something that you should be kind of aware of and something able that you feel more comfortable in dealing with. I know obviously with COVID, we've definitely seen an increase in people struggling, not only financially, but also with mental health and other things as well. So now is a good time as always to kind of talk about suicide prevention and kind of being aware and how do we talk to people and be more aware of people that are kind of struggling and looking at being aware of kind of seeing and bringing to the forefront how do we talk to people, how do we be more aware of people that are struggling and how do we deal with them. So we're going to talk about QPR and just kind of bring to the forefront some things that we can kind of look for and some things that we can do. Going to be kind of, just more laid back. If you definitely have any questions, hopefully we have at the end some room for questions. I'm definitely going to be aware of our time this morning. So, like I said, if you have any questions at the end, or I know Karen has my information, if you would need to get a hold of me, if there's something that you want to set up for your own business, we can definitely do that as well. So I apologize for the technology snafus. But Karen is going to be my little slide spinner here as we go along. So QPR, it stands for question, persuade, refer. As we start off here, really it's about asking a question, saving a life. The big thing that we want to do here is look at how do we save a person's life? How do we intervene? How do we get involved? I think for a lot of us, we don't know how to get involved. We don't know what to do. So QPR is really meant to be something that is very simple, very basic, something that allows people to get involved in a situation in which we're talking about that is can be very stressful for people. It gets our anxiety levels up. We're not sure what to do. A lot of times when we look at the information with QPR, they kind of go back and compare it a lot to CPR, in which when we look at people getting trained with CPR, they really wanted it to be something basic that people could learn. And if they needed to, somebody could perform CPR on anybody, and it would be something that people would be willing and able to do if they needed to. And people would be more willing and more able to get involved and help people that would need like CPR or some type of life-saving resuscitation involved in them. So they really wanted to look at, when we're talking about people who are looking at wanting to end their life, they're suicidal, they wanted to do the same thing with QPR. They wanted it to be basic. They wanted it to be simple. They wanted it to be something that everybody would be able to utilize, because they didn't want it to be something that would be very complicated, because obviously if you're in a situation and somebody's talking about they don't want to live anymore, you don't want it to be this very problematic, very systematic thing that you have to remember and be like, okay, what do I need to do here? What's the first step? What's the second step? Where am I at here? Because, for a lot of people, your adrenaline's going, you're very stressed, you're anxious, and you don't want to have to remember something very complicated. You want to be like, okay, what do I need to do here? How do I help this person? So QPR, question, persuade, refer, like I said, that's real basic. That's what it stands for. Go to the next slide. So really what we're looking at and why I think it's important to, come to you guys today is we are really talking about suicide affects an entire community. It really is a complex issue, and it will take a whole community to work on it. So it can't be like people can't sit back and say, well, why do I need to learn about suicide prevention? Why do I need to be involved in it? It's not something that I need to deal with. It's not something that's going to impact me. Like it says here, it really does take a whole community in which to work on this. We can't just sit back and say, kind of put the hand over our eyes and say, it's not something that I need to be involved in. It's something that probably, if it hasn't yet, it will affect us at some point, someday, whether it's a family member, somebody that we know, somebody that we maybe already have lost at our business, or somebody at our business, a family member that they have lost to suicide. So it will impact us in some sort of way at some point. So it really does affect and take an entire community to really look at this issue. And when we look at the bigger issue of mental health, obviously we can see how that really does impact our entire community. Next slide. So when we look at some basic suicidal facts, and some of these you may be familiar with, but it really is the 11th leading cause of death. Suicide takes the lives of more than 30,000 Americans every year. There's about one suicide every 12 minutes. It's estimated that there's about 25 lost survivors, and these are the people that are left behind after a person takes their life. These are the family members. These are the significant others. These are the grandparents, like I said, the spouses. These are the people that are left behind. We are fortunate enough here that we do have a survivors of suicide loss support group. There's other ones in other communities, but for a lot of people who are left behind after the person does decide to end their life, it is a significant loss. It's something different than if somebody dies from cancer or they die in an automobile accident or something like that. It's a significant loss. It's a different kind of loss. So it's something that people have a really hard time with. Next slide. So when we look at statistics here in Portage County, we are significantly high as far as suicide rates. So, like I said, when you look at our numbers for the last couple of years, I do have that last year in Portage County, we had approximately 11 completed suicides. And the year before that, we had 12. So in Wisconsin, in 2019, you'll see how many completed suicides we had. As an average, Portage County ranks fairly high as far as completed suicides. I know some of the counties have seen their suicide rate go up, obviously with COVID, with people being more isolated, being more alone, not being able to have access to resources, and not being able to have access to what they are usually utilizing as their support groups and different things like that. So you can see as a whole, Portage County, we rank fairly high. We're still, as far as our numbers, males is the highest as far as the gender, as far as for completion of suicide, obviously, and then female. We're starting to see, we're still highest as far as firearms for way that people are taking their lives. And then next, what we're now seeing is people that are utilizing hanging as the second way in which they are choosing to take their life. So I feel that, we're at a pretty high number. And I know for a lot of people, they may say, well, that doesn't seem high or whatever. They may see that the number should be higher or whatever. But I look at it as even one is a number that we don't want, because that is somebody's family member, that is somebody's aunt, that's somebody's uncle, that's somebody's sister, that's somebody's mother, that's somebody's brother. So really, what we want to look at, obviously, from a coalition standpoint, is how do we get that number lower? How do we get that? Obviously, we'd want to see it at 0 would be our ultimate goal. So these are where we're at as far as our stats. Next slide. So when we look at risk as far as suicide, what we're seeing is white males 45 and older are at our highest risk of suicide. What we're seeing, like it says, is as people get older, the risk increases. And we have been seeing that here in Portage County. A lot of that, I think, has to do with different things, different changes that they have in their life. It could be loss of job. It could be medical reasons, health reasons. It could be loss of spouse, loss of significant other, different things that could be changing in their life. I think a lot of times for people, they may think that once a person gets older, it may get easier for them because they have things down pat in their life. They figured it out. Like I said, it should be getting easier for them. But unfortunately, like I said, what we're seeing is they have other complications in their life, health issues, friends, they may be losing friends, they may be having health problems, they may be having their significant other, may be having health problems, they may have lost their significant other, they may be retiring and not necessarily transitioning to that well, other complications, other issues. So that is something that we're seeing here as well in Portage County. Next slide. We are seeing young people, obviously 15 to 24, who are at a high risk as well. And obviously that 15 to 24 age group, you can definitely see where there's a lot of turmoil, a lot of changes that they're going through in their life. I know I've been kind of keeping track of things recently, and we've been seeing a lot of young people recently who have been coming in who are attempting suicide. I know here in Portage County, we have been lucky that we have not had a teenage or under 18 suicide completion in a number of years, but we have had some serious attempts. But we have seen an increase recently in our teenagers who are attempting suicide. I think a lot of that has to do with, and I'm not sure, but if it's the things that are going on with school, with online schooling, with going back and forth to school, different stress, different things that they're feeling with isolation, not hanging out with friends, different things like that. But we've definitely seen an increase in teenagers who are experiencing suicide attempts or are definitely having problems. So that's something that we're looking at addressing in this community. Next slide. And the very young. A lot of times I think people think that little kids, ages 7 to 14, the younger children are kind of oblivious or kind of untouched by this, but that's not true. We're seeing younger and younger kids who are coming in who are definitely talking about suicide or even attempting suicide. And I think that's one of the things that we need to look at, that you definitely can have that conversation with them and talk about coping skills and talk about suicide and different things like that, because they're hearing about it, they see things about it, and, you definitely don't need to shelter them or coddle them, because like I said, they hear about it. We have kids that are 7 or even younger who are talking about it, who are even saying that they're having thoughts of wanting to kill themselves. So it's definitely a conversation that needs to be talked about and needs to be had with younger kids. Next slide. So the LGBTQ youth are definitely at risk, obviously, for various reasons. A lot of times there's verbal abuse. A lot of them are experiencing rejection. A lot of them are not necessarily welcomed by their family. A lot of times there's a lot of bullying, rejection in school. So they have a lot of issues with not feeling like they're wanted or they're supported by people. with having problems, like I said, not only at school, but then not feeling the support or the connection at home, so really struggling with different things. A lot of things that we're seeing with a lot of teens is just a lot of struggling of where they're at as far as sexuality, just gender issues, and just trying to figure a lot of that out. And so just a lot of stress alone with that, and just like I said, just trying to figure out where they're at and trying to feel like where they belong. Next slide. So you do hear a lot about suicides in the armed forces, with the VA and different things trying to handle that. That is something that we do see in our community. Obviously, they're at a higher risk with being in the armed forces. One of the reasons being with firearms, they're more likely to utilize a firearm, which makes it where there is a lot less intervention that can be done and more likely that they will die from suicide. So, like I said, it does put them at a higher risk. We have had veterans in this area who have died by suicide. There was one of those deaths from 2020 was a veteran. So, in trying to work with the VA and different programs as far as looking what we can do with providing services for our veterans. Next slide. So when we look at as far as what makes, we kind of talk about risks and different things that put people at risk, but then we talk about what is the resistance, what makes somebody more resistant as far as not being at risk for suicide. So some of the things are really people having different things in their life that they belong to and having support. So some of these are having best friends, having a calm environment. A lot of times we look at people who come from just, an unstable environment or just a chaotic environment. People who have job security or job skills, support of a significant other, support of family members, people who have good health, positive self-esteem, just a sense of hope that tomorrow is going to be a new day, or a sense of hope that, tomorrow is going to be a better day. Difficult access to means. Our coalition works a lot on access to means, access to firearms, different things like that. Just once again, trying to look at intervention. Pets, we look at pets can be a huge intervention or a huge connection for people with really helping them. But, you kind of look at with this wall of resistance, once again, we talk about positive things in people's lives, just them having a connection, having something that they feel a sense of that they are responsible for. Next slide. So some other things are, like I said, protective factors, what helps to protect people. And we talk about that idea of just having them connected to something, having this sense of support. So we talked about friends, neighbors, coworkers. A lot of times I talk to people about, do they know who their neighbors are? A lot of times people talk about, they have no idea who lives next to them. They have no idea who their neighbors are. Would you even know who, if the mail started to pile up next door to your neighbor, would you go and check on your neighbor? And a lot of people are like, I don't know. Well, that's kind of sad, that we don't have this sense of just kind of like belonging and feeling like we care about people. And I think, we see that a lot with just COVID and different things like that, but just this idea of being part of something and being nice to people in general. It's like, do you take the time to say good morning to people? Do you take the time to say, have a nice night to people? Just genuine friendliness and being nice, just having people feel like they are part of something and feel like, life is good. People are nice. People are friendly. Just that whole idea of, feeling like they belong to something or feeling like people care. Like I said, that whole idea of, do Do you know who your neighbor is? Would you even know if your neighbor didn't come out of their apartment for a day? Would you knock on their door and be like, hey, are you okay in there? So coworkers, family, community organization, groups, that whole sense, like I said, of belonging to something, or being like, if I didn't show up for something, or if I missed something, somebody would notice, somebody would care. Um, Next slide. Life skills, having life skills, problem solving, coping skills is a huge thing. How do you cope with things? How do you deal with things, when things go wrong, when you're not having a good day? How do you deal with that? How do you struggle with that? How do you go on? How do you deal with that in an alternative way that's not a bad way? How do you have these positive, healthy coping skills? Ability to adapt to change. We see that with COVID. Just when we think something is okay, then it changes the next day because of COVID. So how do you adapt with that change? How do you deal with that change? Or even just talking about it, that, this is really frustrating, and being okay with that, and talking with that with other people, and just being like, okay, this is something that other people are feeling too. Self-esteem and that sense of purpose. And I always talk to people that it doesn't have to be this huge purpose of what is my life going to be. Your purpose can be something every day. I can get up today and I can be like, you know what? Today I'm going to say hi to everybody I meet. Or today I'm going to open the door for everybody. And that's going to be my purpose for today. I think sometimes people get caught up in this huge thing of, what is my huge ultimate purpose in life going to be? And that is so overwhelming for people, because then they feel like they're never going to get there. And instead, you have to break it down and make it a lot more simple. Other protective factors: family cohesion. Who are you close to? Support, from teachers. Um, yeah. Intentional acts of kindness. Yeah. Well, I love that. Kindness, being kind to people. Support for teachers and other adults. It could be from coworkers, it could be from anybody, just that attaboy, you're doing well, you're doing good. Next slide. I gotta be careful of time here. Help-seeking behavior, impulse control, just that sense of work confidence. So they have a stable living environment. Is work a stable living? Is stable, not work a stable living environment, but is work stable for them? Do they have that to go to, or is work chaotic then, and stuff too? But where do they have that sense? Just kind of team participation, that they're able to participate in something. Next slide. So really, this is about kind of training, getting to increase knowledge, likelihood for someone to intervene. Next slide. So QPR, once again, it's about asking a question and saving a life. Next slide. So basic suicidal thinking, what you need to understand is people who are contemplating suicide have something in their life that is causing them great pain, and they have no idea of how to make it go away. They see suicide as their only real way to make it go away. They see the pain as that they're never going to be able to solve this. They're never going to be able to change it. Next slide. So it's not intended to be a form of counseling. It's really intended to offer hope to these people. Next slide. So helping one person might not change the whole world, but it could change the world for one person. So it's really about helping this one person, doing what you can. Next slide. So a lot of times people have this idea that once a person is suicidal, there's nothing that you can do. But a lot of times it's about, if a person in crisis can get help, they will probably never be suicidal again. Well, sometimes people will continue to be suicidal, but it's about a lot of times intervening and getting this person help. For many people, they will utilize the help and they will get the help that they need. Confronting a person about it will make them angry and increase the risk of suicide. For most, that's not true. I always tell people that If a person's going to be angry with me because I'm asking them if they're going to kill themselves, I'd rather have them angry and alive than them no longer here. You can deal with the anger later, but you can't deal with it if they're no longer here. For most people, they want to talk about how they're feeling and they want to open up and deal with what's going on. And really, once again, this is everybody's business. We need to feel more comfortable. We need to talk about and be able to talk about suicide and talk about things that are going on. Next slide. So most people, it says keep plants themselves. Most people talk about it in some sort of way or communicate something about it before they look at trying to take their lives. A lot of times people say that people that are talking about it are looking at or want just attention. I always say that if somebody is talking about trying to kill themselves, if they're looking for attention, the big thing is here is that obviously something is not going right in their life. Something is not right. If they need to talk about killing themselves to get attention, what is going on in their life that they have to go to that degree to get people to notice them or to get people to pay attention to them? Something is not right. So let's talk about this. What is going on? And once again, suicide is preventable. Let's look at what can we do to provide help. Next slide. So I'm going to kind of skip through this, but it really kind of talks about the Golden Gate Bridge. And they did a study with the Golden Gate Bridge, and they were able to study people who had jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and actually survived. And one of the things that they found in interviewing the people that survived is all of them that jumped, actually at the point that they jumped off the bridge, all of them said, I wish I wouldn't have done this. So it gets them to believe that how many people who look at that take their lives think the same thing. So once again, it goes back to really supporting the effort of if we can get people the help that they need and provide some sort of intervention, it would be able to stop the person from going on to complete suicide. So if you want to go to the next slide, the next slide, and the next slide. So some suicide clues and warning signs. You're going to want to take them seriously. Next slide. So once again, we kind of talked about the suicidal perspective. Once again, for people, they believe that they are in a place in which they can't get out of. So you'll see that these are all can't. They can't make decisions. They can't sleep. They can't eat. They can't get out of their depression. They can't see the possibility of change. So once again, these are all can'ts. They can't see the possibility of anything changing, anything getting better. So really for us, it's about trying to offer them some type of hope or being able the ability to see things that they possibly can get different, because where they're at, they don't see that. Next slide. So people will be very direct at some point in time. They might say, I've decided to kill myself, or if such and such doesn't happen, I'm going to kill myself. So it might be related to something like if I don't get this raise or if I don't get this job or whatever it may be, they're going to kill themselves as a result. Next slide. Or they might be more indirect and they say, I just want out, or who cares if I'm dead anyway. So once again, it goes back to being able to ask the question to the person. Next slide. So a lot of times we look at, once again, that risk assessment as far as where people are at. So we know men are more at risk than women. Women attempt suicide more, but men complete suicide more. Age, we talked about higher age is more at risk than lower age. People who have chronic physical illness are more at risk. Mental illness are more at risk. Use of alcohol and other substances put them more at risk. Less social support. We talked about the idea of people being connected and having support. Obviously, a previous attempt put them at a higher risk. And then organized plan. So I think a lot of times people get more anxious about things, and this can kind of look at, if a person's at like a higher risk, where this kind of puts them. If you have somebody who says, I'm going to go home and I'm going to shoot myself, I have a gun and this, that's somebody who's more organized than somebody who says, I'm going to kill myself. I think I'm going to take some pills, but I'm not sure what kind of pills I'm going to take. There's different ways to kind of tell if somebody's more organized than somebody else. Next slide. So behavioral clues, these are different things that a person may be doing. You can kind of tell by behavioral changes, things that they're doing. Um, Unexplained anger, putting personal affairs in order, giving away things, withdrawal, person who starts to withdraw, that they used to be somebody who was really social. They just start changing, they start doing things different. And once again, this goes back to asking the question, asking the person if they're thinking about killing themselves. Why are they doing this? Why is their behavior changing? Why all of a sudden are they, not hanging out with people? Why are they not as social as they usually were? Next slide. Increase of inwardness. We start to see where people isolate. Once again, we talked about, why are they not hanging out with people anymore? Why are they not, they used to join the group and go out for lunch. Why are they not doing that anymore? They withdraw from their favorite activities. They're not doing things that they used to do. They used to play volleyball. They're not doing that anymore. They're not, whatever it may be. Loss of motivation. And this is where a person is not motivated anymore. And it's not just the person who doesn't want to go to work Monday morning. This is a person who, they're not taking care of themselves anymore. They're not eating. They're not, hygiene's kind of bad. They're just, they're not taking care of themselves anymore. You can kind of tell that things are kind of going downhill for them. Why is that? Why are they kind of looking poorly? Why are they just kind of, they're not looking good. They're just, like I said, they're not taking care of themselves anymore. Why is that? What's going on? Cynical attitude about things. This is the person who just, life sucks for them. They don't like anything. Everything is bad. Everything is just blah. They don't like anything. Everything's kind of like the person who just, nothing is going to work for them. Everything is bad. Everything's going to be ruined. Nothing works. Feeling self-hatred. These are the people who just, they don't like themselves. And nothing works for them. Everything is bad. These are also the people who, if you try to reward them or try to tell them that they're doing well, they're not going to accept that. They're going to kind of push that back because they don't feel that they have achieved anything or they're worth anything. Lack of direction or aimlessness, a person who just doesn't have any goals, doesn't feel like they're going anywhere, going to be able to do anything. Next slide. Situational clues. Once again, this is significant changes in a person's life. And this goes back to those coping skills and how do people handle things. And for some people can handle different things in their life well, and some other people can't. These are different changes. And everybody has different degrees of this. Fear of becoming a burden to others. For some people, that is different things. I give the example of, like, let's say the university, a student who isn't doing well. All of a sudden they may think, oh my gosh, my parents are paying for me to be in school. I'm not doing well. Now they see that as, my parents are paying for me to be here. I'm now going to be a burden on my parents. My parents are paying for me. They're kind of like throwing their money out the window, and I'm not doing well with that. They may see that as, I'm a burden. Whereas somebody else may say, well, that's not really a burden. So it's kind of a person's perception of things. So not everybody sees things the same. So once again, it kind of goes back to their perception. So different things mean different things to people. So loss of any major relationship. Some people can be with somebody for 2 weeks and the relationship ends, and they see that as, they were going to marry that person, they were going to have children with that person, that was the love of their life. And somebody else may see that as, you were with that person for 2 weeks, really? So different things mean different things to people. Like I said, it's kind of their perception of things. So, and like I said, too, coping skills as far as how people handle things, how they're going to deal with things. So situational clues, like I said. Next slide. So tips for asking the suicide question. Obviously, if in doubt, don't wait, ask the question. Because what are you going to wait for? It's really important that you ask the question. If the person is reluctant, be persistent. I always tell people, um, this isn't about kind of like following the person around and asking them continuously. Obviously, if you ask a person repeatedly, they're just going to get annoyed by you and they're not going to want to answer you. You know, you don't want to be like, well, are you suicidal? Are you suicidal? I know you're suicidal. You need to just tell me if you're suicidal. Because the person is going to shut down and they're just not going to listen to you. They're going to be like, you know, get out of my face. I don't want to deal with you. But if you're really worried about this person and they tell you no in the morning, you know, maybe you want to go back like later in the day or something like that and say, hey, you know, I'm really concerned about you. You know, I've seen these certain things in your behavior. Are you having thoughts about killing yourself? So maybe you ask them later on during the day. Obviously, talk to the person alone in a private setting. Allow the person to talk freely. The big thing with that is I think sometimes we rush because of our own anxiety, because of how concerned we are about them. So we have to kind of allow them to talk. And for some people, that's all they need to do is kind of talk. And I know for myself, I'm guilty of trying to rush or trying to give them things that they could do or trying to help them with their problems right away. So sometimes I have to remember to kind of like tell my brain to kind of shut it down and not try to think of how to problem solve for them right away. So, like if you have somebody who comes to you and they start talking about, well, I've been with this guy and da da da, this is kind of what he's doing. Immediately, your mind might want to jump to, well, this is what you need to do. But if you do that, if you immediately kind of jump in on the person and be like, well, this is what you need to do. You need to throw all his stuff out on the lawn and you need to send him packing and stuff like that. If you kind of jump in and do that, what is she going to do? You know, the thing is she's going to probably kind of shut down and she's not going to want to she's not going to want to continue the conversation with you. So the big thing that you have to do is really kind of allow that person to talk. So you have to just kind of be like, tell yourself to be, okay, I need to just let them talk, let them kind of share with me what's going on. And just like I said, not just be like real quick of, well, I know what you need to do and you need to do this and you need to do that. So you need to just kind of shut it down, like I said, and just allow them to talk freely. And just, like I said, and then kind of need to tune down sometimes your own anxiety too. And sometimes that's hard because you have somebody sitting here telling you that they don't want to live anymore. And sometimes you want to kick it in high gear and make sure that they're okay and stuff too. But once again, sometimes all they really need to do is just share with somebody how they're feeling. And two, give yourself plenty of time. I know that we all have 20 million things that we need to be doing and we need to be here and we need to be there. But it's really about connecting with the person and giving them the time and the space that they need. And, if you're checking your phone and you're checking your watch and you're looking at the clock and stuff like that, the person's going to know that you need to be someplace else and you're busy. And once again, they're going to stop talking. They're going to be like, you know what, I'm fine. I know you need to be someplace else. And they're going to shut it down. They're not going to talk to you because they probably go back to that burden thing. Because as it is, a lot of people that I talk to here at work and stuff already feel like they have a hard time opening up and talking to people, and they don't want to be a burden to other people. And if you start kind of doing that clock watching or looking at your phone or different things like that, they're going to be like, yep, I'm taking this person away from something else, and they're going to shut it down. So once again, you want to give yourself time. So, and have your resources ready, whatever it may be, crisis cards. And we have crisis cards. So if you guys need crisis cards, just let me know, or whatever you have in your agency. If you have EAP, different things like that, have that stuff ready, have things ready for people. Where can they go? Who can they talk to? Because I always tell people too, doing something is better than nothing. If you walk into a room and a person is laying on the floor and not breathing or whatever, you're going to do something, I hope, right? You're going to go over to that person and you're going to check for breathing. You're going to call 911. You're going to do something, hopefully you're not going to just kind of walk out of that room and do nothing. Doing something is always better than nothing. Next slide. So once again, it's about asking the question. So however you want to ask it. So you might ask it, you might have a less direct approach. Have you been unhappy lately? Do you wish you could go to sleep and never wake up? Or have you been very unhappy lately that you've been thinking about ending your life? Next slide. Or direct approach. Are you thinking about killing yourself? A lot of people will say, well, I can't ask somebody that. Yes, you can. You can ask somebody, are you thinking about killing yourself? You ultimately want to know, is the person thinking about killing themselves? So you may have a different way in which you might want to ask it, but ultimately you want to know, is the person thinking about killing themselves? And I know for some people, that's when the anxiety comes in, because you're like, well, if they say yes, then what do I do? So then, we go to the next spot. Next slide. So once again, talking to the person who is suicidal, it's about connecting with them. Tell the person that you're concerned about them. Discuss your observations with them. Tell them, this is what I've seen. This is what I'm concerned about. You've been coming into work late. You haven't been talking to people. You've been looking really bad lately. You're not taking care of yourself. You've been giving away things lately. And once again, these things might mean something completely different, but ultimately you're trying to figure out, are they having any thoughts of wanting to kill themselves? Once again, you want to ask the question without dread. You don't want to express any type of negative judgment, because you don't want them to feel bad about how they're feeling. Next slide. You don't want to ask the question, once again, you're not suicidal, are you? You don't want them to feel bad about how they're feeling. You don't want them to think about that they're doing something crazy or stupid, because once again, it's not crazy or stupid to them. This is how they're feeling. Because they are, once again, as we talked about before, they really feel like they are stuck somewhere, that they can't go on, that they can't deal with the problems or their significant issues that they're having anymore. Next slide. And once you get a yes, next slide. It's about persuading them. How do you persuade someone to live? We all have persuasion skills. We all have ways in which we persuade people to do things, whether it's persuading somebody to change our tea time, whether it's persuading the store clerk to take back an item that they really shouldn't take back, whatever it is, but we all have persuasion skills. So we want to look at persuading somebody to stay alive. So most people who have suicidal thoughts really do want to find a way to live. So persuading them is typically not that difficult. So really, persuasion begins with that simple act of listening, because for a lot of these people, nobody has ever listened to them before. Next slide. So we want to look at giving them our full attention. And a lot of times it's just that simple act of starting with, what is wrong? We don't want to interrupt. We don't want to rush to a solution, like I talked about before. Don't judge them. Really, it's about offering hope to them. Next slide. So persuasion, again, recognize that they're having a difficult time right now. Wow, you're really having a hard time. I tell people all the time, this isn't about having some type of magic thing to say or do. It's a lot of times it's about simple things. That sounds really hard. I'm sorry to hear about this. Once again, there's some things that you don't want to say, but let them know that you care and are concerned about them. I care about you and want you to be safe. It's that idea of connecting with them. I'm concerned about you. I'm really worried and don't want anything bad to happen to you. Next slide. Then ask, will you go with me to get help? Will you let me help you get help? Will you promise me not to kill yourself until we found some help? I always tell people the third one, only utilize that if you have a really good, close relationship with the person. If you don't know the person that well, don't have them promise you anything, because it puts a lot of impact on you and you don't want to have that resting on your shoulders. For example, if you're sitting next to somebody on a bus, they'll promise you anything if they don't know you because they don't care. Sure, I'll promise you I'm not going to kill myself because they don't know you. It doesn't matter to them. But then that carries a lot of weight on your shoulders. The third one only usually works for people who have a really close relationship with somebody because once again, it's about, well, you know, God, I promised my best friend that I wouldn't do this unless I did this first. So like I tell people, don't use that one unless they have a really, really close rapport relationship with that person. So persuasion too, with that one, it's about giving the person options. Ultimately, it's about you want them to do something and it's about getting them to do something. So it's giving them options. So they won't do this, but they'll do this. So ultimately, they're going to do something. Next slide. So once again, they may not believe that they can get help or be helped. You know, there's no help for them. So this is about getting them to realize that there is, you know, no, there is something that you can do. Things can change, things can be better. So it's really about getting them that referral. It might be making that call for them, whatever it may be. So, like I said, it's about giving them options. It's about giving them different things that they can do. It's kind of that same idea of, like I said before, doing something, getting them to maybe take a crisis card is better than them doing absolutely nothing. Next slide. And once again, remember, all efforts to persuade someone to live instead of attempt suicide will be met with agreement and relief. Once again, for most people, they do want to get help. Next slide. So for effective QPR, say, I want you to live, I'm on your side, we'll get through this. We'll get through this. So once again, it's connecting with them. You know, we'll get through this. Sometimes you have to get other people involved. It's a lot to kind of be with this by yourself. So you might have to look at getting another coworker involved, maybe getting a friend involved, getting a family member involved, you know, kind of working on this as a team. Excuse me. You may want to follow up with a visit or a phone call to just check to see how the person's doing. A lot of that depends on how you may know this person or what your relationship with this person is like. Next slide. And obviously, when you apply QPR, you plant the seeds of hope, and hope helps prevent suicide. Next slide. And Portage County here, we do have some resources. We do have a crisis line or the text hope line. Like I said, I do have crisis cards that I can get people if people want them. Next slide. Other crisis hotlines, you know, there's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, Youth Hotline, the Hope Line, Trevor Hotline. We also have those cards available as well if people want them, that are for the LGBTQ, that are available for people to utilize. There is, I believe, a call line as well as a text line. Next slide. Also, I talked about the survivors of suicide support groups. There's one in Wausau. Next slide. There's one here in Stevens Point. And I think the next slide is just my info. Oh, no, one in Wapaka. And then I think the next slide is my information. Yes. So we do have our coalition has a website. We also just recently, are on Instagram. Look at us just moving with technology. And that's where we're at. Information in Wisconsin Rapids, as far as for a survivors group, Kimberly, yeah. I don't know if they have one, Kimberly. If you go to what is it? If you email, do you have my, if you email me, I'll see if there is one. Do you have my email? Did you get my
Michelle,
email?
can we put that in the chat again? Or I have Kimberly's email address. Michelle, you can always send that to me and I can get it to her.
Okay.
Thank
Shelley
you.
just put something in the chat too about a crisis intervention referral in Rapids on phone number.
Michelle, do you see the other question in the chat right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Give her a second to read through that.
I think it's, so the question is when you identify a person who has suicidal ideation with a plan, how do you best approach the person's family and inner circle to provide more support for the person without causing more trauma and or family dysfunction for the person struggling? I think it's hard at times, but I think you have to have that conversation with the family and inner circle as far as what is it that they're able to provide. And then I think that if they're not able to provide that support, I think if the family and the inner circle is then like limited, or if they're negative and not able to provide that support, then I think you have to come up with then a different plan for the person and then find that other support. And I mean, we see that here with patients a lot, in which the family is not supportive or there is no family. So then looking at what is that other support going to be, and having that conversation with the patient of that the patient continues to try to go back to the family to find that support, and it's just not going to be, it's not going to happen. And I always tell people that, you know what, it's not like the movies, unfortunately. Well, the movies are changing, but that you're never going to get the support that you want from your family. And by you continuing to kind of go back and try to find that, all you're doing is kind of continuing to create that trauma and that negativity for yourself. And you're going to have to go out and you're wasting your energy that you could be using to find more positive, healthy support for yourself. And maybe, like I said, you have that conversation with the family and inner circle of what are they able to do, if anything, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other last questions?
So if the person is underage and the family is in denial, I think that is hard. I think my question would be, is the family in denial because they think the person is attention seeking, or is it that they don't want to see it because they don't want to blame themselves? I guess would be my question. So I think that you would have to, I think, educate the family more on why is this person having these problems, and that it's not more of an issue between that it's not like I said, I think if it's a teenager, I think sometimes parents can kind of see it as they don't want to necessarily acknowledge it, because is it more of me being a bad parent, or is this more of where my kid is looking for attention? But then it's a matter of, okay, no, and I can't, it's hard for me to say because I don't know the complete situation, but okay, is this child really struggling, or is it we need to come up with a safety plan of how do we keep this child safe? And I think it's hard because, Laura brings up a good thing, and we go through this a lot with teenagers that we have admitted on our unit, and we deal with this a lot with parents of normal teenage behavior versus suicidal thoughts, because unfortunately, teenagers have a lot of normal teenage behaviors that can sometimes look like some of the behaviors that we talked about, like they can be agitated, they can be other things and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're suicidal. But one of the things that we talk to parents about here is there's things that you can do still at home to make sure your child is safe. Like we talk to all parents about, you need to lock up meds, you need to lock up pills, you need to, there's lots of things that you can do in your home to make sure your child is safe. Firearms need to be locked up, or they need to go to a different residence. I mean, there's so many things that you can still do at home to keep your child safe.
Michelle, thank you. We appreciate all the information. We thank you for everything that you do. Your 20 plus years in mental health. It's a tough job, and we appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Again, thank you everyone for attending. Our next business exchange is scheduled for April 14th, so watch for more information to come. TDS is the sponsor of that program. Our business after hours I'd like to invite you to is Monday evening, 5 until 7. It'll be hosted by 212 Fitness, so we hope that you can be there. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.